My name is Mike Shadroff. Thank you for joining us today. I am the co-president of ANJEE. And today also from ANJEE with me, I have Kelly Wenzel, co-president, who's going to be helping out with some of the hosting, and Pat Heaney, who former president and present trustee. And I see Liz Johnson is here, who is on the board, as well as Kendra Mintz. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to participate in what I'm calling one of our all-star casts of sustainability and climate panelists. So we're excited that you are here for this workshop, the New Jersey Education for Climate Action Stakeholders Initiative, as part of our 36th annual winter conference. Of course, we'd love to be with everybody in person and have the ability to actually hug and say hello, but the fact that we're still in the same space at the same time on this really great day is outstanding. So just want to also thank for the opportunity to make this year free for everybody, to get rid of any economic obstacles with all the things that we've been through. PSEG has been one of our sponsors, New Jersey Natural Gas. And we have this wonderful anonymous donor who just wants us to know that they are a friend of science and environmental education. Also, this particular workshop is also being sponsored by EnviroClean, janitorial and maintenance services, who are committed to providing commercial real estate, including schools and colleges, throughout New Jersey with exceptional service while being at the forefront of the green cleaning movement. EnviroClean offers a broad range of office and building cleaning services that can be tailored to meet your needs, and I am going to drop their link into the chat box. Also, just so everybody knows, we are placing the link to our YouTube channel in the chat room, so we are recording this as well as all of our sessions. We encourage you to please check out our YouTube link. So you can see actually workshops from our fall conference, but all the ones that you may not be able to make in the next couple of weeks. So let's get started with the New Jersey Education for Climate Action Stakeholders Initiative. This is basically, it's an organic collaboration of stakeholders engaged with a few efforts to implement the new climate change education standards across the K-12 curriculum, to scaffold the standards into higher education institutions, and to ensure that our schools and colleges are properly positioned to train the clean energy workforce we will be needing in the coming decade. The goal of this workshop is to present ideas for implementation and solicit input from the audience for future action. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Ashwani, and he is from the New Jersey Higher Education Partnership for Sustainability, affectionately known as NJ-ECASI. Ashwani, all yours.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate that. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the session. So there's 7 of us here, and there's 3 things I'll say by way of setting the context. The first is that New Jersey now has a standard for K through 12 education for climate action. And that was really the kernel of sand that triggered our effort. The second piece that I'll say is that climate change is something that we need to take action on urgently, and it requires prioritization across the board. We want to see it scaffolded throughout the education system, K through 12, higher education, and so on and so forth. The third thing I'll say, it is absolutely without question true that we are in a place where we can make a real difference to the way in which this whole effort plays out. And the time for action is now. So the New Jersey Education for Climate Action Stakeholders Initiative, NJ-ECASI, was formed as Mike pointed out, as a collaboration of individuals and organizations working in the education space, formal, informal, community, vocational, K through 12, 2-year, 4-year, college and university, to promote education for climate action across this space within the state of New Jersey. So the one key point that I want to stress, environmental justice and climate justice, that is to say racial, socioeconomic, gender-based justice, are crucial themes that need to be woven into the entire curriculum and across our actions in an active and meaningful way. Our goals, as Mike pointed out, are threefold. One is to make sure that education policy implements the standards, the climate action standards, in a meaningful and progressive way. Second, to ensure that education at all levels and content areas of the K through 16 standard have the knowledge, skills, and attitude supports to effectively integrate climate education into all subject areas throughout all action-based curriculum, and to ensure that students in their transition through primary, secondary, and post-secondary education space encounter an additive and coherent curriculum, one that scaffolds across the curricular landscape. And finally, to ensure that climate change knowledge, science, and policy are diffused across the entire curricular landscape in age and developmentally appropriate ways at every grade level. This matters because we want to reach beyond the self-interested to make sure that every student in New Jersey is climate savvy. So that's the long and the short of it. As I pointed out, the seven of us here, Frank Napold with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Michael Heinz with the New Jersey Department of Education, John Henry with New Jersey School Boards Association, Jamie Cloud with the Cloud Institute for Sustainability Education, Marc Rogoff, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, Radhika Iyengar, Earth Institute at Columbia University, and myself, Ashwani Vasishth. I'm Professor of Sustainability at Rampo College and President of New Jersey Higher Education Partnership for Sustainability, or NJ-ECASI. So to kick this off, I'm going to punt first to Frank Napold, who will introduce himself and make a few brief remarks. The way the session is going to play out is we'll each make a set of brief remarks, 3 to 4 minutes, then open it up for discussion. Take it away, Frank.
Well, it's a great honor to be with you today. It's a momentous day. I'll just be transparent with you. I work at the federal level in climate. I lead climate education and community engagement. I've been doing it for 15 years. And so today is a momentous day. And I have one eye over here on this other screen looking for the presidential actions on the new White House website to see what happens when in the language specific to how the United States rejoins the Paris Agreement. Why that's pertinent to this issue is also I have to acknowledge that New Jersey has done something unique in the nation. It's my job at a national level to look at how this work goes, because we federalized education in the United States. There's an unevenness to this work, and there's also an organic nature to how education relates to climate. And New Jersey is the first state that has looked at it as a truly interdisciplinary approach. Other states have done other things that are really important and significant, but as it's related to standards, no other state's done what you guys have done. It's ambitious, it's right, it's really going to be important how it's done. And this is where the federal resources have to come in partnership with the state and all the organizations that are going to do this. It's a heavy lift. It's the right lift, but it's a heavy lift. As you're talking about the curricular resources, organizations like NOAA and other federal agencies have a large play of support. We have a lot of trust. Come and I'll put things in the chat that relate to this. But I mean, there's a lot of organization that has to be done if we're going to make this lift important. As it relates to higher education, the same is true. As it relates to the workforce piece is incredibly important. I want you to think about this. I used to be a middle school teacher. I taught earth science in middle school and loved it. I didn't leave because I didn't like teaching. I loved it. I just got yanked out of the classroom and I haven't gotten back yet. But a sixth grader today in 7 years is going to be graduating. 7 years. So the climate action that's going on in New Jersey, within 7 years, they could go through a CTE program, come out with a technical certification, and begin implementing and get a great job in solving climate change in New Jersey without any trouble. The problem we're having is the coherence of that learning journey from 7th grade all the way through to what they might do if they want to leave high school, or they want to go into an associate's degree, or they want to go in and get bachelor's to keep on going. But the amount of capacity we're going to need to solve this problem is massive. And the greatest question I was ever asked by a student was, I was doing a climate change talk, and he said, the question I want to know is, are all the jobs going to change? And I was like, one, that's a brilliant question. So let me just acknowledge that. But the second one is, yes, some jobs are going to go away. Some jobs are going to change, and some jobs are going to show up. And knowing which thing to prepare for, because one of the biggest tragedies we see in this country is when a junior in college finally gets a true climate change course and they feel completely blindsided because they hadn't heard this issue before. And now they're like, I've just spent 15 years, 12 years, 10 years, 8 years preparing for a future that now I have to rethink. And so all those internships and classes and books and movies and everything that they've done in their wide range of learning, they are not ready anymore for a future that they didn't. So it's part of our job is to help them get ready for that. The transformations in food, transportation, electricity and production, housing, you name it, in the next 10 to 30 years is massive. So our students need to be fully prepared to be contributing both as citizens and as workforce in that transformation. And if they're ready, then we're in good shape. Just making sure I think I've got my time. I'm going to put a couple important links, but know that the federal government is reorganizing right now today to really start figuring out how we can support New Jersey and the other states and communities across the country. So I'm excited to be here and look forward to the conversation in the panel. Sorry, I went a little long. I'm excited.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Frank. Great way to start this off. So Mike Heinz is going to take it next. Mike, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. So for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Mike Heinz. I'm the science coordinator at the New Jersey Department of Education. So I want to kind of lay the groundwork for where we've come from and what we're envisioning for climate science, climate change education. We brought in 130 educators from across the state to review and revise our academic standards. And the First Lady, Tammy Murphy, met with everyone and made a case for the importance of climate change education. And what became particularly obvious was the fact that climate change is not just a science issue. Climate science and the mechanisms for how climate operates and the warming of the atmosphere and its impacts is certainly driven by science, but there's a lot of social, political issues intertwined. How we communicate about it has a lot to do with visual and performing arts. So the decision was made to incorporate climate change across 7 of our content areas. Math and English language arts were last revised in 2016 and weren't up for review, but we developed new standards for career readiness, life literacies, and key skills. We have climate change and comprehensive physical education. Our new computer science and design thinking standards include climate change. We added, I'm sorry, we didn't add, we edited 10 performance expectations out of the 208 performance expectations in the science standards. Social studies, visual and performing arts, and world languages all also have climate change education in them. So one of the things that we're encouraging is that educators dig deeply into the new standards and figure out where there's overlap with climate change and understanding climate change and its implications. Through that process, you'll be able to better understand the new standards. They have a new structure and everything but science. And that new structure is going to have some definite impacts on teaching and learning. So digging around and figuring out where the intersections lie is going to be an important process. So there, some things to consider. All kids are entitled to develop a scientific understanding of climate change and how engineering solutions can allow us to mitigate the impacts and adapt practices and build resilient systems. Underneath that is the fact that we need to frame the learning from a position of hope. It's really easy to go down a dark hole with the problems, but it's important for kids to understand that through the scientific understandings, through thoughtful engineering design, that there is hope. The other important piece is that climate change is a social justice issue. Environmental injustice, including the proliferation of climate change, has disproportionate impacts on communities of color and low-income communities. So it's really important to bring their voices to the table, bring community organizations and community organizers and business sector into the conversation so that we can leverage all of the diverse knowledge and expertise and values that everybody has to bring to the table. It is interdisciplinary, and one of the reasons that we developed the standards in the way that we did is because we wanted to make it relatively easy for educators to see how to create interdisciplinary learning, how to, have kids make sense of standards from social studies and science and visual and performing arts all at the same time. So, you can triple dip with your time and resources. We want kids to engage in learning opportunities that focus on the science and engineering practices of modeling, data analysis, argumentation, and design solutions. We want three-dimensional teaching and learning happening. So the framework for K-12 science education, if you're not familiar with it, is the blueprint for the New Jersey Student Learning Standards for Science. There's a tool called the EQUIP rubric for science that we use to evaluate lessons in units. There's a lot of very well-intentioned people and vendors out there who are going to be coming out of the woodwork with great climate change education materials that they want you to purchase or want you to use. Please be a critical consumer and evaluate things. At this time, with the lift that we have ahead of us, it's really important that we work as a community, that we come together across sectors, formal and informal education, business and industry, advocacy groups, and we work together to co-design an approach to creating equitable learning opportunities for all of our kids. So I'm sure that I ran over as well, but Frank set the tone, and I always follow what Frank does. He's my icon. He's my hero. So Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate that. So you make some really important points about transdisciplinarity and about the point about hope and leading from a place of hope rather than despair, and taking a positive cut at this. So to build on that, John Henry is going to take it next. John, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here today with the others on this panel. It's just really important work that we have ahead of us, and many of us have been doing this this kind of work for many years in New Jersey, and I'm just thrilled to be here to be part of this again. So for those of you who don't know me, I am the STEAM and Sustainable Schools Specialist for New Jersey School Boards Association. I've been with them for 9 years doing sustainability and STEAM work. And another first, I believe, that New Jersey School Boards Association is the first school boards in the nation to actually hire somebody like me to be a specialist, also train their school board members in sustainability. So I think that's another first as far as I know. But I wanted to set the stage here for the school board being the governing, body of the school. And it's great that we have the standards now. It's incredible. And it's great that we can have these now in the standards and in our classrooms. But my goal, or at least our goal at school boards, is to have the governing body, the school board members, understand that this could become part of the culture of the school, not just in one class or two classes or just a few things peppered here and there. We want to make sure that's really adopted across all areas of what the school board members can do. And I just want to frame that as that, and I don't know if many people know this, but I want to go over what the school board members actually can do in their role. So one is provide a program of quality instruction by adopting curriculum standards, all right, with, of course, the climate change as academic goals for students aligned as an integrated approach to existing district sustainability practice and their existing goals. It can assess the district and personnel needs to ensure student achievement of the standards that are aligned specifically to college readiness, a clean energy workforce, and a green collar careers opportunities. And Frank had mentioned that before about the green collar careers, or we need the workforce and offshore wind, and there's so much going on. There's so much that's going to be needed. The students really need to really be informed of what their opportunities are, no matter what pathway they choose, whether it's college or whether it's technical skills or both, some hybrid model. School board members they can support professional development and training for staff, align the climate change standards and effective delivery methods such as project and problem-based learning, design and systems thinking, and require reports on the results of student assessment and achievement. They also provide for the effective management of the school by employing and evaluating the chief school administrator's understanding of effective climate change education, establishing policies for monitoring the district finance, curriculum, building and grounds, and personnel, and requiring reports on the results of policy implementation of climate change education. They also provide two-way communication between the community and the Board of Ed. This is a really big one because a lot of times the community members are not sure what's going on inside the school, and the Board of Education is that link between the two. So they can, by informing the public about school sustainability and climate change programs and how it will impact students and the local community, promoting parents' presence and their participation at sustainability and climate change related school functions, evaluating the chief school administrator on how effectively parent or parental input is solicited, and working to secure public support for the schools and public's understanding of the school's sustainability and climate change goals, sustainability improvements to the facility, and the implementation of climate change standards across the curriculum. So I just wanted to kind of frame that in what your board members can do to support the climate change initiatives and, of course, the ongoing sustainability practices that have been, kicked off in quite a number of years in New Jersey. So what is school board, what does School Boards Association do to support sustainability and climate change? We, when I first started working with School Boards Association in 2012, one of the first things we did is we contributed to the creation and management of a CTE green program of study that was out of the New Jersey DOE. And we worked collaboratively with Judy Savage, the executive director of the New Jersey Council of County Vocational and Technical Schools. And we managed that program for 2.5 years. It had 3 pathways: sustainable energy, design, architecture, and construction. We offer Green Leader certification and board members for board members who participate in sustainability workshops. It's more or less their continuing education credits. There are some mandated things that they have to do, but these are continuing ed, and it's their choice. We run workshops with Rutgers University called RUI STEAM Ready and design challenges for a sustainable future. We run and we created with a collaboration with the U.S. Army STEAM Tank. STEAM Tank is an open-ended design challenge which has a sustainability and a climate change component in it. And I think this is one of the main things that school board does is we have what's called field service representatives that help districts with setting with green goal setting, strategic planning, sustainability policy, and climate change language. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, we do have a discretionary policy in sustainability, the environment, and now we are modifying it to also include climate change language. And that should be out and about and available in probably the next 2 weeks or so. We do Facebook Live sessions and workshops. We have a pretty large media center that we provide information on sustainability and others through our what's called our School Leader publication, and also an electronic version called School Board Notes. And of course, school boards, last but not least, supports the work of Sustainable Jersey for Schools, New Jersey Audubon, Green Ribbon School, and many other organizations to help board members understand sustainability and climate change from many different perspectives. So I will stop there. I probably as well went over on time, but I just wanted to set the stage for what your school board members can do to help move this forward.
Thank you, John. That was really well put. And you're at a critical place in the system, pivotal point in a sense, where you fulcrum the whole system around. And so it's really good to have you there.
Thank you.
So next, building on Frank, Mike, and John, we have Jamie Cloud, who's going to bring her own particular perspective to bear on this issue. Jamie, it's all yours.
Thanks, Ash. Hi, everybody. As you can see, we're taking a whole systems approach here tonight. And I'm focusing in on what we and everybody needs to know in order to understand climate change and how to reverse global warming. So the first thing that I would say, Cloud Institute, by the way, is we do coaching and professional learning on curriculum design, leadership development, helping school systems make sure we can educate for a sustainable future. So the first thing that I think everybody needs to know is systems thinking. One of the attributes of systems thinking is what we call distinguishing problems from symptoms. Climate change is a symptom of unsustainable behavior, which is a symptom of not having been educated for a sustainable future, not being prepared to build that capability to thrive over time. So that's one of the things I think we need to understand is that if you treat symptoms, you will what we call shift the burden. Address your symptom in the short run, make it worse in the long run, and create new problems. We have many examples of that. We don't want to do that. We want to do problem finding before problem solving. The next thing that I want to mention is metacognition. We have to be thinking about our thinking all the time. We love Einstein's quote, "The significant problems we face can't be solved with the same thinking we used to create them in the first place." So what is that different way of thinking? Some of those attributes I'm mentioning today. The third one is the physical laws and ecological principles. Most people, 2 out of every 1,000 people I speak to, remember what the first law of thermodynamics is. So we clearly, I love the New Jersey Science Framework and everything that's going on in the standards, because we clearly need to know more science and understand what science is and all the rest. Some of the key things, the first and second laws of thermodynamics, there is no such place as a way. Good to know, so we can stop throwing things there and pretending there is one. Understanding the difference between climate and weather, of course, is key. interdependence, understanding that all systems have limits, and that diversity makes life possible. These are all things that no high school graduate should leave without deeply understanding and knowing what to do about it. The next one is ecological economics, and part of that is just understanding the value of soil fertility and forests, not just the intrinsic value, but the economic value, as well as the fact that the earth has climate regulation functions baked in, and we just need to create favorable conditions to restore those functions. The next one I would argue is stocks and flows, which is another systems thinking and system dynamics concept. Stocks are the entities that can go up or down, can accumulate or be depleted. Flows are the amount that come in and the amount that go out, like a faucet and a drain in a bathtub. And we can't put in more faster than is taken out. And you can't take out more faster than is put back in. That's pretty simple for anybody to understand. So if kids are understanding stocks and flows, they can certainly understand making sure that we have just as much carbon as life needs to function on this planet. And then the last thing I'll say is, and trying to do a good job of time, there is such a thing as structural tension in physics, where the goal, there's a tension created between our desired future and the goal and our current reality. And so what we like to say is stick a nail in it up here. There's two ways to reduce the tension, and tension seeks resolution. Two ways to reduce it. Lower your expectations, or as we like to say at the Cloud Institute, stick a nail in it up there, and then figure out how the heck you're going to get from here to there. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jamie. Always such a pleasure to be with you in a session. Really nicely put.
Thanks.
So Marc Rogoff is going to take this next, coming back to the state perspective. Marc, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Marc Rogoff from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Like Frank and John, and Mike, actually, I was a middle school science teacher for many years, and have been doing now environmental education for 42 years. While each of us is doing our part to reduce or eliminate our own impact on the environment, and particularly climate change, by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and shrinking our carbon footprint, the New Jersey DEP is working to make that easier, more understandable, measurable, and preparing the state for future impacts of climate-related phenomena. The DEP climate change website, which I'll put in I'll put all the websites I mentioned at the end into the chat. That website offers research and scientific data on the basics of climate change and human impact, climate mitigation, resiliency, and actions that individuals and groups can take to help achieve the governor's goal of an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. To accomplish these goals, the state released the 80 by 50 report, and state agencies are considering development of workforce training programs to prepare the state's current and future workforce with the necessary skills and to support New Jersey's greenhouse gas mitigation goals. To support this, the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities has a training resource webpage, and there is also an online clean energy learning center. Each of these, as I said, will be in the chat at the end. While actions to educate will help to reduce our impact and lessen the effects of climate change, improving our resiliency will allow us to protect our lives, homes, and communities from events that will rival Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Katrina, which will undoubtedly occur in the future. To help prepare the state, DEP is currently working with 16 other state agencies to develop statewide climate change resilience strategies. Along with these initiatives, New Jersey has released information about expected changes to stormwater, sea level rise, ocean acidification, and other changes that are not immediately associated with climate change by the public, but are. These and more can be found online in the 2020 New Jersey Scientific Report on Climate Change. As you know, New Jersey is the first state in the nation to incorporate climate change across education guidelines for K-12 schools. To assist, DEP offers educational resources to public, private, and homeschoolers, as well as non-formal education facilities through the state's Environmental Education Directory website, or SEEDS. We have included links to curriculum supplements produced by the US EPA, NASA, NJ-TV, National Geographic, the National Wildlife Federation, the US Geological Survey, New Jersey Audubon, Project WET, and others that can be taught as is or modified to fit New Jersey-specific communities, New Jerseyizing the lessons. And we are available to assist with these endeavors. We plan on offering professional development workshops for educators using the Project WET Climate, Water, and Resilience Guide in the spring, either live or virtually, depending upon the status of the pandemic. There is still much to do, and educators can assist government agencies, such as the DEP, by alerting us to specific focus areas or topics that we might have missed. This is a group that will succeed through bottom-up and top-down efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc. Really an important perspective you bring to bear there, and such a pleasure to have you on the panel as well. Next, we have the person that actually triggered this whole initiative, Radhika Iyengar, who had called me up one day out of the blue and said, hey, you've got a climate education standard, let's do something about it. And so here we are. Radhika, all yours.
Thank you, Ashwani, and it's just such an honor to hear my esteemed panelists and learn a lot from them. So it's really an honor to be here. And thank you for actually getting this group together, and we can do wonderful things together. So my today's discussion, I just wanted to focus on communities. I'm at the Earth Institute, Columbia University, and we do a lot of science-based work, but I thought that through my international education work, I thought that the community element was missing in a lot of what Earth Institute was doing. Recently, I published this article in UNESCO's journal on what can education learn from COVID-19, and what can we as educationalists learn from COVID-19. And I focused it on communities. I live in Millburn, New Jersey, so I focused it on what Millburn is doing to learn from the COVID experience. And as you must have seen that, I think there are a lot of things happening in the communities. The original or old style of education that only happened in schools and teachers and students, I think is an old model, and a lot of community participation, a lot of parental involvement, a lot of parents seeing children's books and seeing what they're reading for the first time, communities getting involved, making these parental pods, and starting a community library, just book exchanges. My children are being taught by some other, my neighbors, teenagers. So a lot of these non-linear forms of learning happen very organically. So I wanted to focus more on how can communities be involved in environmental education. And we started, so Earth Institute, Columbia University, we started this Eco Ambassadors program, mainly in Millburn with around 70 families. It was very organically done. Earlier on, we used to do a lot of action and meet in the libraries and other things, but for the COVID period, we started doing a lot of sessions online on Zoom, and we realized that we have a nutritionist in town, we have a Purple Dragon, vegetable co-op in town. We had so many different experts. We had like a public speaker, we had like a some other expert who we were all in town, and we started doing all these classes online, and it was all related to environment and what we can do. And we wrote poems together, we wrote songs together. So it was a lot about community involvement and how we can actually focus on these approaches. The approach that we at the Center for Sustainable Development, Earth Institute, we took was of citizen science. We started working in the Eco Ambassador program in 2018, so relatively very new, and started connecting students to scientists, and we started learning, as the other panelists had mentioned, including Jamie, that we really need to learn on science and get those facts before we start our activism. So that's our basis. getting to know the science facts, and then seeing how we can actually all relate to each other's problems and solve these environmental issues. Those became our focus. So our question was mainly how through our science knowledge and through our activism, we can work with our township committee members on environmental issues, work with our environmental commissions, work with our various green teams, and make science come alive through parental participation. So because if a student, one of our students, eco ambassadors, started collecting water samples in various different counties in New Jersey, and got the water tested from a scientist at Columbia University, and realized that there's so much of microplastic, and started actively promoting the idea of reducing plastic, and became a big proper advocate for it. His family also started following this. So there was a ripple effect of student led research which we just helped to facilitate, and then the effect was on communities and schools as well as parents. So it was very, very holistic, and we got to learn from all these amazing research that was happening. Also, how can families and communities help to support this children's learning behavior? I think it was very crucial. And during COVID-19, we all realized that this is possible, and how can we all work together to learn about local environmental issues, and also learn from all our networks, and learn from all these non-linear pathways that we have in communities, and strive towards eco activism. So yes, Eco Ambassadors actually program started in Melbourne in 2018. We are working with 70 families, but it's a small start. I think we can do much more, and we can learn from our communities much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhika. Really grounded us very well there to anchor the conversation. So rather than add to the points that have been made, I thought I'd sort of switch this around a little bit and ask a question, something that I think we're all concerned about. It seems to me that we're basically all on the same page in terms of what needs to happen. And each one of you has laid out a number of resources that will allow us to make those things happen. What do you think are some of the obstacles to success in this case? What is it, do you think, that we need to absolutely keep our eyes on that might stymie our efforts to make this transition happen? Frank, do you want to take it first?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this exact question for a very long time, and we've done some significant community work to kind of unearth the answer. It comes down to basically two main things. Thing one is funding. There's not enough funding to really do the work that we must do here, whether it's the professional development, getting the curricular resources together, building the supports from partners who need to really support the number of students that are in New Jersey, let alone the nation or beyond. The other one is coordination. There's so many amazing efforts that are going on out there, and there's a lot of gaps. But the coordination of who's doing what, and I'm a coordinator. I was transformed from being a teacher to a coordinator, so I'm like a carpenter. Everything we see, you have a hammer and you start looking for nails. I'm like coordination. So, but ultimately it is a coordination issue, because a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, Marc, most people are not going to know about that because there hasn't been an effort. Or Jamie, the stuff you were talking about, the missing opportunities for taking a great resource at the right time and bringing it in, that's a coordination problem. And so those two show up over and over and over again.
Thank you.
We're trying to work on that.
Perfect. So Mike, what keeps you up at night?
I'm going to answer the question by not answering the direct question. I think we're at a really interesting inflection point in education. The last 4 years has really shined a bright light on inequities, racism, And I think that we have an opportunity now at this particular moment to leverage the expertise in the community and help folks become part of the solutions, in inviting people and making sure that we don't set up accidental barriers to contributing. So, you know, what would keep me awake at night is if we do more of the same, and that we don't take advantage of this opportunity to rethink who we bring to the table and listening to a broad range of experts.
Thank you. For somebody that didn't answer the question, you answered it very well. John, do you want to take a crack at this?
I could take a crack at it. Yeah, I think that, you know, I mean, when I started at school boards in 2012, we started to come in with some of our really fundamental training programs for just board members at the time. And I was talking about climate change and then leading into sustainability and how it could help the school. And we weren't getting a lot of people in the seats at first. So what we had to do is change the narrative to, we even had the name, sustainability leadership. And then we changed the name to alternative funding, sustainable schools. And then people were starting to come in because and my point to this is we had to change the narrative at the time because that was the landscape, right? And then I didn't care how they came in, as long as they were sitting in the seats. Once we got them in the seats, we can show them that all of the things that we do, you know, collectively and, you know, individually was really going to make a difference in the school if they started to focus on sustainable practices. But they had to get in the seat first. They didn't see themselves as change agents. They only saw them, you know, as board members. They saw what they had to do superficially, but they weren't engaged in sustainability at the time, not to the level that they are right now, and certainly not the level they would need to be when we're talking about climate change. So I think education is critical. So it keeps me up at night is that I'm hoping that the board members and the school staff really pays attention to the education, the climate science, the policies, the things that are going to make this collective impact on that. So, you know, again, from our perspective, from a school board perspective, we're going to do what we can, you know, to educate the board members. And we're going to rely on a lot of the folks who are on this call and in the audience who are watching to provide some resources on that. So yeah, just really education for board members and seeing themselves as bigger change agents than they see themselves as right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Nailing it there again. Jamie, what do you think might cause us to stumble on this path, and what can we do to avoid that stumble?
So I think we need to make sure that we distinguish schooling from learning, and particularly from transformative learning. I think we need to believe in the power of youth leadership and young people's motivation and creativity and their brains and everything about them. I think we could do more of that. I think we need to make sure that we make it possible. I think it was Mike that said, we have to make sure everybody is hopeful. Everybody is assuming that we can turn this ship around and head toward a sustainable future. That mental model that sustainability is possible is key, and we need to make sure, because if you think it's game over, or you think there's nothing we can do about it, then you're not going to do anything about it, obviously. And then the last thing I think we need to pay attention to is thinking about making change is really hard. It's a death threat from the brain's point of view. The actual work is joyful. And so we need to stop being worried about change. Change is inevitable. If it's living, it's changing. So don't worry about that. Just focus on doing the joyful work of heading toward the future we want.
Thank you, Jamie. Marc?
I always like to point out whenever I'm giving a workshop or a lesson to kids that the biggest threat to the environment, or the biggest threats, the two biggest threats to the environment are not what they think they are. It's not climate change. It's not rampant destruction of forests. It's not pollution or the change of in sea level rise or anything. The two biggest threats to the environment are ignorance and apathy. And we both have jobs. Every learner has a job. Every presenter has a job. It's make people aware so that they care. And because if you don't care, you're not going to change. And if you're aware, you're going to start to care. We just have to let people know more. That information has to get out there. The science has to get out there. Because, as I've said many times, it's very easy to change a child's viewpoint because they're open to almost anything. It's the adults that are the hardest to make changes to. However, there's always something that works. Usually it's money and time. And I call that the watch and wallet principle. But nobody uses watches anymore. But anytime we can show the audience, there you go. Thanks, Frank. Anytime we can show an audience that this is going to save you time and this is going to save you money, they're going to start reacting to it. And there's going to be hopefully the actions that we want. And that's probably not what keeps me up at night. I have a dog and children, but that's usually how I address the audiences, to get them to try to think, because at the end of any awareness issue, the moment you're aware, you won't forget it. It never leaves your brain. And we have to make people aware, because that leads to caring and actions.
True, so true, so true. I'm in the habit of making magnetic bumper stickers for my car. The one that I have up currently says, "You can't care about what you don't know about." And that jives very well with what you're saying. Radhika, any final thoughts before we open it up for questions?
I think Marc said it all. Just wanted to give a personal story here that in my day job, I go to the Earth Institute, learn a lot about science. I work with the UN leaders. I work with lots of other influential leaders. But when I come back, since I came from India, I came here to the US a couple of years back. I didn't know which plastic to recycle, which numbers go in the recycling and which didn't. So there was this big dichotomy. Here I am talking to all the world leaders and Columbia University forums and other things, but I didn't know how to recycle stuff, and I found information, did other things. But I wanted to make it easier for other moms in my neighborhood. So we created this community together and started working on, various things and education, and everyone is interested in all of this. It's not like just a few of us. It's just how we build the momentum and what we can do. So there's a lot of community power. I think that is there. We just need to make sure that we become the change agents in the community and bring in others in our folds and learn from each other. So I thought that was a changing moment in my life.
Thank you. Thank you. I love the way you bring it back to community every time, because that's where it all belongs. Thank you so much. Mike Chodrov, have you been watching the chat for questions?
I have been.
Yeah.
Yes. But first of all, I love the fact, it feels like there's an absolute theme here that goes beyond climate education. It has to do with community. And I think, Jamie, as you say, you can't have a strong community unless you're applying systems thinking to that. And then it gets back to what Marc just said, and I tell my students all the time, we don't protect what we don't love. So let's get outside and start loving some stuff out there. That being said, one of the questions that came up earlier, Julia Summer, who I know, I'm going to ask the question on your behalf. If you want to clarify it, please feel free to come off of mute. But Julia asked earlier, specific to what's going on in New Jersey, by what date are schools supposed to begin implementing the new standards, and what accountability exists to make sure it happens? I'm assuming, Mike Heinz, you might want to start with this.
Yeah, so the current timeline is that science and visual and performing arts will be, that your curriculum will be updated September of 2021. So about a calendar year to update your curriculum. All the other content areas, their implementation date is 2022. The beginning of that school year. And in terms of accountability, all public schools are evaluated and monitored by our county offices of education and the CUSAC process, which is an accountability system. And they look to make sure that your curriculum is up to date. So there is a monitoring process that happens if you need that stick rather than the carrot of doing great things for great kids.
Sorry, Mike, could you just repeat again which are the ones for 2021 versus 2022? You said science and visual arts and something else?
No, just those two disciplines for 2021.
Just those two. Okay.
And performing arts, you said.
Yeah, visual and performing arts. Yep. That's all. That's one discipline, apparently.
Thank you.
If I could jump in to piggyback off of what Mike just said about monitoring at the local level, I did mention earlier that the school board can work with the superintendent. You know, and the school board can ask good questions, and they can evaluate how it's being implemented. So at the local level, the school boards can ask the right questions to the superintendent, who will be the instructional leader of the school, make sure it happens.
All right. Thank you. Elena, do you want to ask your question? Feel free to come off of mute.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I wanted to ask, how can we explain it to kids? Because it's a complex subject.
So if kids understand, I'll just jump in with a quick one. If they've seen a bathtub and they understand that water comes in through the faucet and goes out down the drain, and that you don't want to pour more water in faster than the drain can take it out, otherwise the bathtub is going to overflow. You can use that as a way to help kids understand the simple concept of stocks and flows, and that we want to make sure that there's a balance of carbon in our atmosphere, just like the balance of water in a bathtub. So for the little ones, that's all we have to do. Increase sequestration, soil fertility, forests, green spaces, make sure the carbon has somewhere to go, and then make sure we don't emit more than the earth can sequester. And for the little kids, that's all they need to know, is we want to keep a healthy environment. Well, not all they need to know, but that's one way to get the party started with the little kids. We want a healthy community, healthy environment, and we want to keep it in balance.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
So to add to that, go ahead.
Well, just a quick one. We at the Clean Network is a NOAA, NSF, Department of Energy, a couple other funders portal that we were working on since 2009 on this exact area, on the sciences. We have yet to catch up with New Jersey. That's going to take us a little bit of time. But on the sciences, we have some guidance pages specifically on elementary that just got NASA funding, and they're now live. So, but one of the key points here is that if you look at the framework or the NJSS and the standards, it's about learning, the foundations of this really go all the way back to kindergarten. So, but you want to be age appropriate, but understand that it's a progression of learning. And so, third graders don't need to master climate change. But there are some foundational pieces that set you up for understanding climate change and human impacts and, engineer solutions. So it's like, make sure that they understand it. But the one thing that occurred to me a couple of years back was, if I'm teaching third grade, every now and then, as you know, you get a student who's like, asks you that just zinger question that is up here at like 10th grade. And so as a teacher, you got to be pretty far ahead of the students in your own understanding, because I remember every now and then I'd be like, wow, that's like up in the college level. And I don't know the answer, but let's work it out together. But either way, it's about progression of learning. It's a lifelong process. So, that's what these new standards are all about. And that's brilliant the way they've done it. So that's the way I approach it.
And I would just add another quick thing, which is that human impacts shouldn't always be framed as negative. Humans, of course, we have an impact. Everything we do and don't do makes a difference. But we can be positive and we can make trouble. So just to make sure that every time we enter the picture, we're not making a mess to kids.
Ash, I'd like to add something.
Go ahead.
Okay. Concerning the question, I have a question. What is it you're trying to actually get across to the kids? But I can give you examples of stuff that I've had success with. And the first thing that comes to mind is find something that they already know a lot about, something that they can relate to. And I'm going to use James's background, his image behind him as an example, because he's got a triceratops and a couple of dinosaurs, which is something kids love, no matter whether it's in the curriculum or not. And when students, little guys, ask me about what is this stuff about climate change, I like to say to them, think about the animals that live in your neighborhood and the animals that you may see, either dead on the street or running in the backyard or throughout their apartment complex or whatever it is. And I'm going to tell you a couple of animals that used to live here a long time ago. And one of those examples is a woolly mammoth. And everybody knows what a woolly mammoth is, but they know they don't live here anymore. And I use that to talk about the fact that it's warmer today than it was a long time ago. Not that long ago, only 20,000 years, but that's a long time to anybody, especially kids. They're not here anymore. And the reason is the world has gotten warmer, 5 degrees warmer. It took 20,000 years for it to get 5 degrees warmer, and another 150 in the last years to get another 2 degrees after that. So what's changed? We did. And kids get that. They seem to understand that. So hook on to something that they know and they love already and expand their horizons. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. So Mike, John, Radhika, do you want to add to this at all?
If it's okay, yep, we have another question. Bridget, would you like to ask your question? You were asking about how do you address fake news or misinformation?
Hi, so my name's Bridget, as he said. So I do education programs and I talk to people of all different ages, and I've come across multiple times where you can't quite make common ground to even talk about things like climate change and things that should be different because you can't even seem to agree on what a fact is. And they sometimes just even outright seem to reject all science. And I was wondering if anybody had any tips on how best to approach these people, because obviously the last thing you ever want to do is become combative or condescending or anything like that. So does anybody have any good tools for finding common ground with these people?
I mean, sorry, I do a lot of stuff in this area, so sorry, I'll be brief in case others want to build I would think that the work that John Cook has been doing for a very long time, currently at George Mason University, he's a partner of ours at NOAA, really, really important work. Inoculation theory has done some very cutting edge work related to education. So the Uncle Cranky book and app, really interesting stuff. Skepticalscience.com has a lot of really important guides on how to do this. But the number one thing is respect. I mean, this comes from older stuff, but you know, I work I'm a federal civil servant, right? So it can't be a shouting match. But at the same time, misinformation, as we all know in our national dialogue for the past number of years, has been a very critical issue, especially with the media bubbles. So it's very easy for people to get very sucked into a media bubble of misinformation, and unlodging that requires very specific skill. John Cook has done some really visionary work on something called complex contagion inoculation theory. Sorry, that's what he says. But you know, check it out. Go in prepared. These are tricky spaces.
Very nice. Jamie, you had your...
No, I'm
Okay.
good. Those are all excellent. I guess I would say it's important to know what people actually do know. And so I would sometimes ask people, you know, what science did you ever study? What peer-reviewed journals do you read? What do you know? Where do you get your science? Because it's important to know what the sources of information are, so you can have a conversation with people. And because I do mention often at town board meetings that you can't graduate high school without making a reasoned argument and backing it up with evidence and being able to distinguish facts from opinions. So that's helpful to people. If you know, we have to have a dialogue and we have to be able to do that.
I think up next we have a question from James Folletti, who is an outstanding educator at the Corpus Christi School, and I believe his question has something to do with being part of the independent school system.
Thank you. So my question is, where do private and parochial schools fit into the equation? You know, I do a lot with my school and community. In fact, we're a green flag school and have our school garden certified by the NWF. But we always find that we're limited to what we can do and participate in, since most programs are directed to public schools.
NAIS, the National Association of Independent Schools, and the New Jersey Association of Independent Schools, and New York, and all of the Northeast are actively involved in this. I mean, to me, it's true that a lot of the Sustainable Jersey for Schools and the state funding goes to the public schools, but you've got kids legally required to be with you. So you play as important a role as everybody. Anytime you're in a position to educate young people, I don't have the answer to how you're going to get funding to do that. That would be not in my wheelhouse.
James, there's one other important point I think that's germane to what you're saying, is that even if we did everything great across the curriculum, that's not the totality of the support for our students. And there are some other additional things we're learning for how to support our students that are really crucial. Some of our partners in informal education play a crucial role in what happens in the K-12 classrooms. And so, you know, like the example of the Wild Center up in the Adirondacks of New York, an informal education institution, have done brilliant work on youth climate summits, which are done in partnership between schools and students and informal education institutions. So sometimes the resources you need, you can find through partnership as opposed to you funding the work yourself and developing it. It's more, you can get there faster. So, you know, look for those partners and those allies that'll help you get there. If I learned anything about doing this for 15 years, is people want to collaborate to get this done. and they've got a lot of great resources out there. So first go to partnership before you go to funding. I'm not saying the funding is an issue. I already said that, but you can get the partnership faster, and you don't even have to be in the same state to get that support.
Yeah.
And Andrea just put in that great link.
The other thing I would say is that independent schools will often not pay attention to academic standards. And so I would say that it might be useful for your school to look at the climate standards and the New Jersey standards as a resource. Even though you don't have to meet them, you can exceed them as independent schools if you so choose.
Great, thank you. Our next question, I'm going to ask Sven Frieder, who is a high school student, if you want to introduce yourself and ask your question to the panel.
Yeah, sure. I'm a part of a high school environmental club that's looking to get involved with implementing these new standards in our district. So starting to talk to the superintendent, board of ed, that type of thing. As students, we're wondering how we should be approaching this and how we can help to, A, make sure that these changes are actually being effective, because a lot of us obviously care a lot about climate change. It directly involves our futures, and we've been waiting for and asking for this type of curriculum change to be added for a long time. And B, how can we help educate our peers and the younger students?
I could take a crack at that. I would suggest that you go to the superintendent and ask to be put on the agenda for a Board of Ed meeting, and have your group go and ask the question in a public Board of Ed meeting. And just tell them what's on your mind, and just make sure it's, clear. If you want to, it won't be a formal presentation, it'll just be in public form. And by the way, anything you asked in a public meeting is recorded in the board minutes, and it goes on record. So that's a really effective way to do it. And then of course you can have some sideline conversations with the superintendent and principal if you wish, but I think the best way to do it is to attend the board meeting, get it on record, and go from there.
I just want to say, I just want to say that Swan, you're making me, you're going to make me cry. She lives around the corner. She literally lives around the corner from me in West Orange, and you're making me so proud right now, Swan.
This is why we do what we do. So yeah, thanks for being a fine representative of what we're all hoping for.
Kelly just answered my question about where the school is. There are upcoming student climate summits all over the state that will be happening in this coming school year and next school year. And we will be, this group and a lot of other groups are going to be promoting them. So just pay attention. You can sign on to emails, listservs. I have one on our Seeds website that will be promoting all of these events, and you can bring representatives from your schools to these events. Hopefully they will be not virtual, but actually live at some point. But it's the easiest way to get involved is just to get out there.
And you probably have a green team in your school, in your community. So that's another thing, if you're interested, join the green teams and educate yourselves. Understand how change happens, and have empathy for the people that don't yet understand what's going on.
Is your school part of the New Jersey Sustainable Schools Network?
We're definitely involved with it. We have
we
applied for some grants for them, and we're trying to get green school certification.
Okay, great. Then you're already on the right track.
One other key point, though, is that students have been schooled. Students are not waiting for the education system to support them on this topic, and they're just tired of the speed of this work. And so the intergenerational dialogues with education system leaders is a critical piece, and what a student can ask for versus a person like me or a person like Mike or Mark, or you can ask for things that are going to get a response in a way that are much different than what adults are going to be able to get. So I would increasingly put more intergenerational with respect but I learned in 2014 when we were doing an education effort under the Obama White House on the climate action plan, and youth are powerful, and so use it. It is your right, and there's no need to wait. But there's something special in intergenerational dialogue that researchers are starting to look at, and so when youth are engaged, adults do very different things than when they're not. So I would encourage you to continue going down that road. It works.
Yeah, Frank, I just want to piggyback off of that. It does work. When I was in a school, our students used to make board presentations all the time. And let's face it, the board is there to represent the students. So when they go in front and they make their presentations, they listen. So I totally agree. It's super powerful, the student voice. And it just as a side note, school boards will be putting together Facebook Lives featuring student voices and what they think about climate change. We're going to start that in February, actually. And we're going to start with some Green Ribbon School awardees or recognized schools. And then we're going to reach out to Sustainable Jersey for schools. But if anybody else knows some champion students, including the person that just spoke, I am happy to put you on the Facebook Live and hear what you have to listen, what you have to say. I put my email in the chat, so please reach out to me.
Great. Thank you, everybody. All right. I think we're going to have time for about 2 more questions. Derek, I see you have just asked a question. So if you'd like to unmute and ask it, please do so.
Yeah, sure, Michael. Thank you. So really interesting panel. Thanks, everybody. So I come from the School of Public Health at Rutgers. And so my question's for Frank, but anyone else, please chime in. So one of the challenges I have is we have core classes that all the students take, regardless of their backgrounds. We're not big enough like Hopkins or Harvard to say all the majors, you do this core class and everyone else do another one. So for helping students with supplemental readings about climate change and related underlying physical and biological sciences, do you have any recommended resources from NOAA? Because I can do the basics in class, but I have to accommodate those where they've already got essentially undergrad science majors. They may already be physicians. We don't want to, we want to have a level playing field, but some of them may want to go into more detail, but others really need a little more help just to get up to speed on the basics. So if you have some recommendations from the NOAA resources online, that'd be great. Thank you. Probably applies to a lot of other people too.
Welcome to the morass of the federal government. Our web architectures are incredibly hard to navigate, but the number one, I would say, now I understand your question more, is the National Climate Assessment. I was on the federal steering committee of that for the 2018 report. I just put the link into it. There's a chapter on, there's a lot of different chapters in there, but it's the most authoritative, publicly readable climate assessment that is current. It was November, it was Black Friday, unfortunately, when it was released, but that's easy to remember, of 2018. But that's where I would start and then build from there. The second one would be the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, which is toolkit.climate.gov. I'll put the link in there. Those two are very authoritative for those types of students. And then the one other link I did was more for general students is NJ-ECASI has some climate change resources that we partnered with them. NOAA is one agency. There's a lot of other agencies in this, about 18 of them involved. So we're trying to take that complexity out of the equation and be more like, we'll do all the back end work on the inside and then put it together in a much more comprehensive way on the outside. We hope to do this in the coming administration. Actually, wait, it's not coming, it's here.
Right.
This administration.
Yeah, so I would just say I'm familiar with NJ-ECASI, and the reason I asked the question personally, and Mike and some others know, I'm on a couple EPA advisory boards, and to say that their website was disturbed and things were removed over the last 4 or 5 years is an understatement. So I appreciate that you pointed out the climate assessment and that you feel it would be at a reading level these folks could understand, and I will revisit the NJ-ECASI. I already have a few things from them, but I'll go back. Thank you.
The key thing about the National Climate Assessment is by law that it has to be readable because it's to the nation. It's not to decision makers, it's to the nation. So we put a lot of extra effort to make the readability for, I think it's a high school student. level. But hopefully that helps you, Derek.
Hey, Derek, Mike Heinz, there's a little college in New Brunswick that I don't know if you're familiar with or not, but they have the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center. I put their URL in the chat box.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, I'm a member of the Climate Institute. I think the challenge there, though, he was making a comment about the government, and Rutgers is one of the largest institutions in the country, and you can literally get lost on our own website. My Leadership Academy project was on this topic. So, but you're right, and I really appreciate Frank pointing out the climate assessment. I think I personally was under the impression, I don't know about others on the webinar, that may have been at too high a level, but if you feel that it was really written for the general public, that's a really good idea. And I believe several people at Columbia that our colleagues here know were authors on that too, like Kim Knowlton. So that's a good idea. Thank you.
All right. Ashwani, do you want to say any final words before we close this out?
Actually, this has been a fabulous session. So I just mentioned that two entries back, I put everybody's email address in the chat. If you want to contact us, please feel free to do that. We're happy to talk about this offline. The only thing I'll say is it's absolutely proper in this conference that we focus on the K through 12 space. But I just want you to keep one eye out for that scaffolding piece of taking this into higher education. It's got to be cumulative, system-wide, and building on itself, right? That's the key, it seems to me. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
All right, well, Ashwani, Jamie, Frank, I don't want to miss anybody. John, Mark, Michael, Radhika. I have been in this field for years, but always walk away with new resources and ideas when I spend time with EE friends and colleagues. We appreciate your time here today and express our gratitude for all the wonderful work you're doing and you will continue to do. So thank you so much. Just so everybody is aware, this chat, once I close down the room, our recording will be saved as well as the chat, and I will make both of them public on Angie's website as well as in our YouTube channel. So just a reminder, we're just kicking off this great 2-week conference. There's a lot of great experiences for learning and networking over the next couple of weeks. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can see everything if you can't attend them live. We have great Saturday in-person field experiences. Even if you've signed up for the conference already, it's not too late to go back and get outside. You want to fall in love with nature, sign up for a field trip. Again, thank you to our sponsors, PSEG, New Jersey Natural Gas, our anonymous donor, and EnviroClean Janitorial and Building Services for today's workshop in particular. Again, feel free to take yourselves off of mute and give them a big hand because this has really been an outstanding hour and a half. So thank you all.
Thank you. Don't forget our live auction. Please visit the auction.
Yes, do so.
Don't outbid me. I bid on a lot of stuff. So
All right. Thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. And
thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks.
Moving forward.
Thank you.
Excellent panel, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well.
Stay safe, everybody.